Viceland produced a Dark Side of the Ring episode on the Brawl for All, and this was a boxing tournament that took place in the WWF that featured wrestlers, actual non-boxers who were just wrestlers, and they would do is they would say who was really tough. So they'd have them fight, and it did not go as planned, to say the least. There were guys who they wanted to make them look really tough by winning out a legitimate shoot boxing tournament, where they would get knocked out by guys who didn't look as good and who Vince McMahon wasn't interested in pushing. So that's really the whole story of the Brawl for All. First, we go to Denver, Colorado, and we see Vince Russo, who introduces himself, and then immediately we go to Louisville, Kentucky, where we see a photo of Vince Russo that's being ripped apart by Jim Cornette, and who introduces himself. That was funny. Just right when first thing they show Cornette, they show him ripping a picture of Russo. It's absolutely hilarious. But Cornette's on here now, and I'm sure they'll get Jim Ross introduce himself as well. So next, they talk about the Attitude Era, and they talk about the influence that the Jerry Springer Show unfortunately had on wrestling. But I don't know, we talked about the Jerry Springer Show. I think it wasn't just that, was everything at that time was very much edgy, and it turned that way for a while, up until the mid-2000s, where things started to go back the other way. But things were edgy, things were gritty. They would do sex on TV. It was crazy all the time. Girls Gone Wild was really popular. I remember that. Of course, the Jerry Springer Show. Violence in movies, a lot of violence, a lot of violent video games. Swearing in TV shows became common. So, a lot of stuff. Adult content, everything really exploded at that time, and that made it perfect for the times for the WWF to become the Attitude Era. I don't think it's necessarily just Vince Russo explaining we're watching the Jerry Springer Show in the background, but we're talking about the Attitude Era. I'm waiting for us to actually get to the Brawl for All, because I've seen like a billion documentaries, people talking about the Attitude Era. Let's get to the Brawl for All. So Russo talks about how the idea came when he had a conversation or a conflict with JBO. He was in the locker room saying he can beat everyone's ass, and he would say there's about 10 guys who can kick your ass, including Joey Styles, but that would happen years later. And he eventually sets up the Brawl for All. That's how he gets the idea and goes to Vince and, shoot fighting. Now we meet Bart Gunn, who I have to say has aged tremendously. He talks about how he was in a bar fight and almost died. He was stabbed with a bottle. I didn't hear that story, but we meet him, and of course he was very integral. He's an integral part of this Brawl for All story. Now we meet the Godfather, Charles Wright, and here he was one of the favorites to win. I think it was him and Bradshaw people thought would win this tournament. One of those two, and of course Bart Gunn. Well, he didn't actually win. We know who won. It was Butterbean. Meet Darren Drozdov, and he's Droz. We know what happened. He was paralyzed in that match with D'Lo Brown on Sunday Night Heat. Very sad to see him in the state that he's in. Next, we get to Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Jim Ross loves this guy. He's from the University of Oklahoma, so he's behind him. He wanted him to challenge Steve Austin, and everything would not pan out that way yet, because it didn't work out with the Brawl for All. Let's say it lightly. So, the first fight was the Godfather, who had to fight Dan Severn. Now, okay, you're thinking to yourself, Dan Severn was in the UFC. He would murder the Godfather, and if this was an MMA fight, he would have murdered him. He would just take him down. There's nothing he can do. However, the rules was takedowns, and it was a boxing match, sort of. It was a mess, and Dan Severn barely wins, but because he knows if I continue on, I could lose, so he decides to save his reputation and drops out. So we see Bart Gunn fighting Bob Holly, and they were partners at the time, tag team partners, and he was unhappy that they had to fight each other. And of course, Bart Gunn destroys him, and it would just be someone who they did not want to push, winning who's going to win the whole thing. Leading up to Bart Gunn against Dr. Death, Bart Gunn's mocked by The Office. He's mocked by Bruce Pritchard. He's mocked by Pat Patterson. He knows this is Jim Ross's guy, Dr. Death, and he is mad. And before they get out there, he's motivated because he thinks the company doesn't have any confidence in him, and they view him as just a body for Dr. Death to beat. And here we go. He goes in there and he knocks out Dr. Death. Man, hearing that Dr. Death story is crazy because he actually got hurt bad. He was knocked out. And he also, I think he tore his hamstring, so he was out for a while just in that fight, all of it. What happened was when he took down Bart Gunn, Bart responded with his own takedown. That's where he Dr. Death tore his hamstring. And He was just a one-legged man. He just gets KO'd badly by Bart Gunn, like a vicious KO. Just seeing the way Dr. Death just crumble. Oof, that was a bad knockout. And there's a story where Cornette wants to kill Russo, as usual, but in the hallway, and he's freaking out because he just cost the company about $5 million. And I'm not sure if that's true, but it did definitely get hurt because they had Dr. Death pinned for a big rivalry with Steve Austin after that. And of course, that all fell apart after that fight. So Bradshaw would advance later. He gets a win over, what's that guy's name? Draws. Forgot to mention him, but it was a close one. I thought most people thought Draws won, but they gave it to Bradshaw, and that would set him up in the finals. The Godfather, then him and Bart Gunn fight they get to semifinals. Bart Gunn murders the Godfather. Godfather hit him once hard, but then he gets knocked down, and then the second one he flattens. It's a flattened KO, brutal KO. So we get to the finals. It's Bradshaw taking on Bart Gunn, and of course Bradshaw is nervous about this. Vince Russo gets his wish. And this whole thing was designed so Vince Russo, he designed this whole thing so he can get back at Bradshaw. As he said, he was bragging about how tough he was in the locker room. So he got all these wrestlers hurt with this awful tournament. Now it's going to become Vince Russo against Jim Cornette. Here we go. This is just annoying. So, they really talk about the ending of Bradshaw and Bart Gunn. And Bradshaw, say what you want to know, as big of an asshole as he is, but he nearly gets killed here because his legs start twitching, like scary. Really scary, and he first gets knocked out. He first gets knocked down, actually, and he gets back up, and the fight should have just been stopped there. He had no business continuing. And then Bart just takes a big swing at him, puts him out, KOs him quickly. That's gonna happen. I mean, you're getting back up once you've been rocked bad. You're gonna get knocked out. When Bradshaw gets KO'd brutally, Bart Gunn wins the Brawl for All tournament. That would not be the last fight that would happen. Of course, WrestleMania 15 with Butterbean would happen next. But they go back to Cornette and Russo. Cornette's just, I don't know. I find both of them just insufferable, to be honest. Cornette, I find him annoying. I mean, he's intelligent, just the stuff he says. I don't know. With Russo, the guy just had a bad. The guy did damage to the wrestling business without question, but at the same time, when they did this thing, Vince McMahon eventually has the last say, so he has to take some responsibility. For them to just throw every single thing on Russo and Jim Ross, I mean, let's talk about him. He encouraged it because he thought it'd help Dr. Death. So they want to throw Russo under the bus. Jim Ross wanted this tournament to happen because it would elevate Dr. Death. Cornette, he probably was behind Dr. Death too. All of them. If Dr. Death had won, this would have been an amazing thing. And they would never give any credit to Vince Russo, but they would be saying how great this Brawl for All was. And Dr. Death's going to face Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's going to be a huge fight, huge strong pay-per-view. But because the guy didn't want to win, it's all Russo's fault. It's a disaster. So it is what it is. So after Bart Gunn wins the tournament, they have nothing for him. I've never heard that before. But they don't know what to do with this guy because they can't just make him into another guy because he's his career, he's just been a journeyman. He was never really, I won't call him a complete jobber, just a guy, just a body, just enhancement talent. So they need something for the guy. Vince's idea was, we're going to bring in Butterbean, and we're going to have him fight Bart Gunn in a legitimate shoot boxing match at WrestleMania 15. Butterbean. Okay, so you're trying to get Bart Gunn killed, basically. That's his punishment. Butterbean's his punishment. They actually have Butterbean interviewed here. That was really cool. That was actually, I'm not sure if the guy was even still alive, but they have Butterbean talk about WrestleMania 15 against Bart Gunn. Bart Gunn and Butterbean both say that, Butterbean, he said this. If he brawled with me, it would have been a 50-50 shot. I don't know if he was joking, but that, Bart Gunn, he got in there. He beats these guys, he brawls with them. KO's Bradshaw, KO's Dr. Death, KO's, so last guy is Godfather, KO's all of them. He's brawling. With Butterbean, he was training in a boxing gym for a while, and he wanted to make this like a boxing match, and of course he gets murdered. He'd probably lose regardless, but right when he decided to start boxing, it was just over within less than a minute. So we continue to see Bart Bart Gunn, he talks about how his life changed. He got into MMA and he went into Japan. He wanted to fight Butterbean, who was doing MMA in Japan. That did not happen again. So what would happen eventually is he would leave the wrestling business, and I think he just has a regular job now and a regular life. They go to draws, of course. He was paralyzed in the match with D'Lo a year after the Brawl for All. They go in depth actually about the draws, and D'Lo Brown, he was in the last episode with the New Jack one, so he is here too. He was in the part of it. He came at the end, and they talk about the draws being paralyzed, and they go to Vince Russo again, and this is when he says he feels bad about what happened to Bradshaw. I mean, Bradshaw was a complete asshole, so it's hard to feel sorry for him. I mean, the Joey style story is funnier, but this isn't too funny because that he could have died there. That was vicious. That wraps it up. They say it's, I think it was Bruce. He said Bruce Prichard, this was the worst idea in the history of wrestling, and they show at the end credits. Bart Gunn agrees with him. It was a mistake. It was a disaster. It was one of the worst things they ever did, was that Brawl for All. So I thought this Dark Side of the Ring was okay. Not my favorite one. Probably not even close to the most memorable one. Something you just watch once, probably never watch again. But I thought it was fine. I thought it was a decent one. Similar to the Montreal Screwjob one from last season. We've heard about this story a lot. Not nearly as much as the Montreal Screwjob, but it was fine to hear a good documentary on this, because this was remembered as one of the biggest mistakes in the history of the WWF and wrestling, because it was just a disaster. So I thought it was a decent documentary, and I enjoyed this episode. And as usual, another very entertaining episode of Dark Side of the Ring.